We have a lilac bush outside of our house, and every spring, when it starts to bloom and the tiny little buds start to pop, and the entire bush a few weeks later is just filled with dripping, beautiful blossoms with the most extraordinary fragrance. Every year that happens, you would think I would be used to it. And I'm not. I'm surprised each time it happens. Not that I really don't expect it to happen, but when it happens, I feel as though it's the first time that it's happening. And I want to say to all of us who are gathered, however we are gathered here together this morning, on this second day of Shavuot, the day after we commemorated the revelation of God's presence at Sinai, that there is a very important message that our tradition conveys to each of us, and that is that we're not supposed to get used to things. We're not supposed to get used to that which we might take for granted, but is really rather extraordinary. We're not supposed to get used to the beauty of flowers that bloom, the glory of nature overall, the diversity and glory of humanity. We shouldn't say, oh, another flower, or there are trees and birds, or, oh, a whole congregation coming together of different people sharing their voices together. Oh, there it is. And at the same time, and fully related to this, we're not supposed to get used to evil. The evil of violence inflicted by one human being toward another through word or deed. The evil of terrorism, the evil of discrimination and persecution, the evil of poverty, the evil of suffering of any kind. It is not completely relevant where the evil is coming from, though the response is different. We should not get used to it. We should not get used to suffering in the world. Oh, there are more rockets. Oh, more innocent people being killed here and there. Oh, more and more people dying in India and other places. The part of us that should remain open to being surprised by the beauty in the world is connected to the part of us that should be open to continuing to remain surprised by the evil in the world, by the relentlessness of suffering. In 1972, Abraham Joshua Heschel gave an interview, and he said the following: an individual dies when he ceases to be surprised. I am surprised every morning that I see the sunshine again. When I see an act of evil, I'm not accommodated. I don't accommodate myself to the violence that goes on everywhere. I am still surprised. And that's why I'm against it, why I can hope against it. We must learn how to be surprised, not to adjust ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel is, as we know, in the midst of a horrible conflict. We can debate about what should be done regarding the status of homes in East Jerusalem. And we can, for sure, have differing opinions, as I know we do in this congregation, as most do, about how Israel ultimately should move forward vis-a-vis the Palestinians. But I do hope that we agree that rockets fired from a hostile enemy into civilian neighborhoods is not something that any country should have to get used to. Israel's right to defend herself is not just a tagline. It should emerge from a bedrock conviction that no country should have to get used to being systematically attacked. And I would add that the Jewish state, where Jews can largely control their destiny after thousands of years of living at the whim of rulers who ranged from being patronizingly supportive and protective to actively hostile, that such a state should never have to get used to this and has a right to defend its inhabitants, and those inhabitants include Jews and people of other faith. Nor should anyone get used to civilian casualties on either side of this or any conflict. To be pained as I am by all innocent victims of this conflict is not a sign of disloyalty. It's a sign of humanity. And from a Jewish perspective, it has a model, it has a template in the spilling of the wine that we do at the Seder to acknowledge the suffering of the Egyptians. We are heirs to a tradition that can do two things at once: refuse to get used to our suffering and refuse to get used to the suffering of other innocent people, even those on the other side of our conflict. This conflict hopefully will end soon, but we don't know. And I, for one, will continue to speak out on behalf of Israel's right to self-defense, and I will also continue to hope and pray and do what I can to support true and lasting peace for all of Israel's inhabitants and for the entire region. It is not mutually exclusive to defend Israel's right to defend, and also, for example, to support grassroots programs that bring Israeli Jews and Arabs together, like the many schools that educate Jewish and Arab children together. One devastating effect and outcome of this current conflict, a manifestation of it, is the eruption of violence in Israeli towns where Arabs and Jews live together. And those Arabs and Jews who in the past have supported one another are trying desperately not to allow all of the trust and goodwill that they established to vanish completely. We're not supposed to get used to the beauty and preciousness of life, especially human life, and therefore we're not supposed to get used to the destruction of life. They are tied together, this not getting used to, and they are mutually reinforcing. Now, some people might be innately sensitive in these areas, but not everybody is, and our tradition provides a recipe for how to avoid getting used to things that we shouldn't get used to. And one of the main ingredients in that recipe is the recitation of blessings. You eat a piece of fruit and you say a blessing to remind you it came from somewhere and you should be thankful. You watch trees flower in the spring and you say a blessing to remind you that even though it happens every year, you shouldn't get used to it. You see a group of people together like we are this morning in the sanctuary and gathering virtually as well. And you say a blessing to remind you each person is a world, each person has thoughts, each person has dreams. You don't just want to get used to people being together. Toward the end of our service, we're going to be saying Yizkor. We're going to ask God to remember the people who walked this earth. And I want to just reflect, we don't just learn from our traditions, we learn from the other people in our lives. Heschel, when he would talk to teachers, he would say, there are texts, but you are text people. You are people who bring the texts alive. And so I just want to reflect on a story that I have shared before. My father, Alav Hashalom, may he rest in peace, used to drive me into Hebrew high school every Sunday. And we would stop at Dunkin' Donuts because he didn't want me to be hungry, and he also liked the donuts himself. And we would sit at the counter, and I remember once the waitress came over and she brought us our donuts, and my dad sort of observed this person, and then he gave her a very generous tip. And when we left and we're getting into the car, he said to me, you know, I don't know for sure, but she seemed a little sad to me. And he came up with the scenario that she was at a point in her life that maybe this wasn't ideally what she was hoping she would be doing. And he said, you know, I have Rahmanis. I don't know the whole story. I just feel like there's something there. There's something that's sad. I wish I could reach out. And he didn't feel that it would be appropriate for him to reach out in any other way. He didn't pretend to know her story, and he didn't impinge upon her. But in that moment, perhaps he was trying to demonstrate to me that behind each person is a story, that you don't want to just get used to people and imagine them in this functional or transactional capacity, to remember and to continue to remind yourself and others that behind each person is a story. We have to retain our capacity to be surprised by the good and the bad, to be sensitive to the layers of meaning that exist in everything that surrounds us, to celebrate the beauty and to resist the evil. And I want to conclude my thoughts by reciting a portion of a beautiful poem, Zot Tefilati. This is my prayer, written by an Israeli poet, Hillel Bavli, who came to the United States and learned and taught here. This is my prayer to you, my God. Let not my spirit wither and shrivel in its thirst for you and lose the dew with which you sprinkled it when I was young. May my heart be open to every broken soul, to orphaned life, to every stumbler wandering unknown and groping in the shadows. Deepen and broaden my sense to absorb a fresh, green, flowering world, to take from it the secret of blossoming in silence. And when my time comes, let me slip into the night, demanding nothing, God, of man or of you. We have a cosmic, Jewish, human responsibility not to get used to things, to continue to be surprised and to act on our surprise. Chag Sameach.